All right, so you've gone through all the previous videos and you know how to do your Redshift setup and your material setup and your document setup. Then you're ready to do rendering and then compositing. So just to kind of walk you through what we have here, we got our, let's see, materials and lighting. Again, we've already done all of this. We've assigned our poly paint and our materials, and we've tuned our material settings. We've gone through with our lights. In this case, pretty simple. We just basically turned off our ZBrush light, and then under your background, we loaded in an HDR image from our light box, and that's going to provide the reflections and the lighting for our scene. Under renderer, we have Redshift turned on. I'm just going to use the default bucket renderer with denoising turned on. And then under here, the Redshift AOV passes. The ones you want to kick off, you can choose in here. You can just hit all and just go ahead and render them all out. And then under denoising, same thing. We'll just go ahead and say denoise all of these passes. That's basically the render passes. You can have them denoise or not. And of course, in here you have other options. So for example, under reflections, if you want the secondary ray visibility disabled or turn to refraction transparency, you can do that in here if you'd like. But the big part is, what AOV passes do you want? And then these are your AOV passes that are going to show up. So with a shadow catcher assigned to my floor, Redshift turned on, my floor turned on, my scene loaded up, I'm going to hit BPR to kick off a Redshift render. And the reason those bucket squares are so small is because over here in our document, you're going to see we're rendering out at 3200 by 2133. That's just basically, 4 by 6. It's going to be postcard proportioned with proportionate turned on. So 3200 by 2133 pixels for maybe a little bit of print quality. And of course, I'm zoomed out here. If I was to go to actual pixels, you wouldn't be able to see the whole image. So again, document, zoom out. All stuff we've covered in the previous videos. So now that we've done that, we have all of these Redshift AOV passes. This little button right here is just to kick off a Redshift render. You can do it up here in the BPR button as well with Redshift turned on in your render properties. This is our beauty render, so we're just going to go ahead and select this one. If you want, you can export out as a PNG or a JPEG, and you can crop it before you save. I'm just going to say Photoshop, and we're just going to dump this right on our desktop. So for every single one of these, I'm just going to click the image and then hit save. Now, some of these I didn't utilize, like subsurface scattering. I didn't really utilize, so just the ones that are showing up here, I'll go ahead and export. And there's no refraction or anything. There's nothing see-through or translucent. And then further down underneath the render menu, we have BPR Render Pass. There's some really useful stuff in here, and we'll be back in here later on in the video to render some more BPR stuff. So this depth pass is nice to have. So we'll go ahead and again click on these. The mask is really nice to have. So we'll hit save. And that's enough for now. So now let's hop over into Photoshop and do our initial compositing. So I'm going to double click in here. And on our desktop, you're going to see, I can sort by type. I have the PSD files. I'm going to grab all these and open them. And then I'm going to go in here to say Window, Arrange, Float All in Windows, just to make it a little bit easier to see. And then on my desktop, I'm going to drag in those EXR files. And when I do that, you're going to see in Photoshop, I have an Exr-IO plugin. It's a free plugin you can download for Photoshop. So when I hit open, it'll go ahead and open the file for me. There it is. And you can see it's a 32-bit image. In order to make this a little bit easier to work with, I'm going to go in here to image mode. I'm going to change it from 32-bit to 8-bit. I'm going to say don't merge. These other ones in here, like the bump normal, I'll go ahead and I'll load them up. I don't know that we'll actually need them. Whenever you load any of these renders out, one useful thing to do is go in here to the channels tab, and if you just click on red, green, or blue, just look at where the white areas are or the black areas are, and you can use those as masks. In our case, green, if you wanted to do like a sun bleach effect where all the top facing surfaces are white, you could use that as a mask, and like I said, fade out your image or use it for, maybe invert the mask, and I don't know, use this however you'd want. In our case, I don't think we'll really need it, but just letting you know, that's what you can look for is in the channel section for useful ways to utilize these maps. Same thing for world position. I don't know if there's anything really useful in here, but again, just look at the channels and see if anything jumps out at you. So we got our occlusion pass, we got our depth. The one I'm looking for first is our beauty pass. I'm going to take our beauty pass and we'll just set this right in here. And let's go ahead and recreate this using our AOV passes. So I'm going to go in here first to the diffuse pass right here. I'm going to hold down Shift and just drag the background in here. That'll just perfectly position it over my image here. And then let's go to our mask. This is our BPR mask. I'm going to do Control A and then Control C just to copy these pixels. And then back here on our beauty pass, I'm going to go in here to our channels, click plus, and hit Control V. That'll paste these white pixels on a black background into our alpha 1. If we want to, label this for ourselves, we can just call this mask. And now if I control click this mask, this will select all the white pixels, which in our case is going to select our little subject here. So if we go back to this diffuse and we just want the diffuse to be where the subject is, I can go down here with that selection made and I can click this layer masks button, and that will automatically mask out just the object here. So you can see when I turn this off, this is the fully rendered image, and then on top of here is just our diffuse. So this mask we don't need anymore. It's already in our image. The diffuse we don't need anymore. Next, let's do reflection. So here's our reflection image. Since this is an 8-bit, I can shift drag it in or Control A, Control C. And then instead of putting this into our channels, I'm just going to paste this in our layers here. And now we have a reflection. Again, just to keep things organized, let's call this diff and we'll call this reflection. Let's go ahead and change this from normal to screen. And on top of this reflection, I'm going to go in here to my adjustment layers. I'm going to add a levels and a hue saturation. Now, if I just start playing with the levels right here, or you could do a curves, it's kind of up to you. Levels just a little simpler. But if I go through here and do a levels now, it's going to do levels on everything visible in my layer stack. However, if I hold down Alt and hover in between, it's going to turn that little arrow icon. I'm going to click with my left mouse button, and now this levels is only applied to my reflection map. So now when I go in here and do my levels, I can make this really shiny, or I can go over here to the left and make it a much more tight specular, or I can go in here and select the reflection and then drop the opacity down. Another thing we can do is, again, hold down Alt so that the hue saturation is only applied to our reflection. If for some reason you wanted to go in here and say turn on colorize, you can go through here and change the tint of your reflection. So if you wanted to be a little bit warmer or a little greener to kind of match the reflections in the scene here, it's like kind of up to you. Or just to make it, again, like I said, warm it up just a bit. You can go in here and just make it a little warmer, take the saturation down or crank it up. It's kind of whatever you're looking for. But this is just to illustrate you can use levels and hue sat on a single render pass to kind of do some just adjustments on just that pass. But in our case, I don't think we'll really need that hue sat. Next, we'll go ahead and do shadows. Now, if you wanted to, it's kind of set up. So if I do Control A, Control C, and then go back in here into our channels, I can I click on that plus button, hit Control V, and now when I Control tap this alpha, which we'll go ahead and name Shadow, if I was to go back in here to my layer, into my layer tab and make a new layer, and I guess fill this with black, you can see you can use a mask for this, or I guess what might be even better is if we go in here, just put in a solid color, and you'll just name it or have it whatever color. Go in here to your channels, Control tap your shadow, and then apply this as a layer mask. In fact, we can probably delete that layer mask, and then with this selection, just say add another one, and there you go. You've automatically got a shadow in there. If you want to change the color of your shadow, you can just go in here to the color. So if you wanted to make it a very dark blue or something like that, you can go in here and use masking for a shadow. Or you could just go in here, Control I to invert, shift drag this onto your scene, name it shadow. We'll go ahead and hide our color fill shadow, and then this shadow we'll go ahead and set to multiply. And then just like we did with our reflection, we can add a quick levels, Alt tap between these, go ahead and get rid of some of that muddiness maybe. And again, if you want to just see what we're doing, I'll change it from multiply to normal. So you can see as we're making this levels adjustment, we're just kind of cleaning up some of that mud in here. And of course, if you want to darken the other side, you can go through here and darken it. But it's all non-destructive. So again, we'll go down here. Well, another thing we can do again is go in here to hue sat and then hold down Alt if it's not going to auto link, and then on this hue saturation, turn on colorize. And again, if you wanted it to be maybe just a touch blue or a touch cold, you can go in here, you can make it really blue, but you just go in here and just play with that saturation a little bit. And now when we go back down to our shadow layer, change it to a multiply, now we have the shadow multiplied. So again, we can kind of use that, set the multiply, and go in here and attune how much shadow we see, how dark those shadows are, what color those shadows might be, just kind of dial those in. So whichever way you want to do it, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of this color fill version of the shadow. Similar-ish to shadows would be our AO pass. And again, this one we converted to 8-bit, so again, I can just shift drag this on here. I'm going to put this above our shadow layer, and I just want the AO pass for my object to be applied. I don't want the background or anything like that. So you could either go in here to channels and control click the mask, or since we've already done this in our layers, you can scroll down to the diffuse, control click that mask, and then on this one go ahead and assign that layer mask. So now this ambient occlusion is only where my object is, and just like you're probably expecting, I'm going to go ahead and switch this to multiply. Before I do that though, we do have this levels and hue set for my shadow. I can just drag this on the plus sign, drag it above my AO, and just apply the exact same settings to my AO. So now I have a levels here that we can go through. This AO wasn't very muddy, so I can drop that levels down. And then again, I can go in here and turn up a dark blue AO or whatever, and then click your AO layer, which we'll go ahead and name this AO. And again, we'll switch this to multiply. And always remember, you can go through here in opacity and drop that down as well. So now you're seeing these all together. You can go through here and just start tuning all these different passes. Our depth pass will come in handy if you want to do a lens blur. So I'm going to or there might be other useful things to do, but that's one of them. I'm going to do Control A, Control C, and then back here in our beauty, we're going to go back to our channels, make a new one, Control V to paste that in there, and we'll call this depth. And one more is our GI pass. We're going to hold down Shift, drag that into our scene. We're going to put this above everything else. You can also hold down Alt to unlink it if it automatically wants to link it for you. We'll call this GI, which is Global Illumination. I'm going to set this to lighten. And you can see what this does is, especially around here on the cheese, it's doing that bounce light effect. That'll just make it look a little more realistic, like your object is actually bouncing light around. And now if I compare, so if I hold down Shift, select all of these layers, and then hit Control G to group them into a group, I can turn that group off, and you can see here's our original render, and then here is our composite. Now, it's not the exact same thing, but you do have the ability now to go through every single one of these layers and fine-tune, how much of your shadow is in here. Go into your levels if you want to make it more or less muddy. You can bring this down. Here's a little bit more sunny. Here's a little bit more shady. So even just doing this kind of gets us back to where we were, give or take. But feel free to use all or none of these, whatever makes sense for you. Now, another really fun, cool thing we can do in ZBrush, if we go ahead and close this down. One thing I should mention, go in here to Document, and underneath Zaplink Properties, you can hit any of these buttons and store your camera. You can also, like we talked about earlier in the series, go in here to Draw, and then if you scroll down, you can store a camera and then name it, or you can go in here to Movie, Timeline, Show, and you can just click in here, and that way if you ever nudge your camera, you can always snap back to your original camera position. So any one of those should work. We'll go in here to Movie, Timeline, and turn Show off. So now we've done our Redshift rendering. Let's go ahead and turn off our Redshift render. And now we're going to open up our BPR render pass and render property. So right now we are rendering a shadow. Let's go ahead and turn on AO, just so we can show you some examples. And then underneath BPR AO, these are so for example, here's our shadow settings. Here's our AO settings. I'm going to take my blur down to 1. I'm going to crank my resolution up quite a bit, maybe my raise up just a bit. And now every time I hit the BPR render, it's going to render at an ambient occlusion. Of course, I really only need to do that once, so let's just kick off a BPR render. And just so I don't have to wait around for that AO to get rendered every single time, I can just click on here, and we'll just do a comparison between the BPR AO and the Redshift AO. So we'll go ahead and hit Save. And now I'm just going to turn ambient occlusion off, and in fact, we'll go ahead and leave shadow on. That'll be useful in the light pass, but if you ever need to, you can also turn this shadow button off. So when you do a BPR render, the shadow won't render. But for now, let's go ahead and grab our light menu and just dock this over to the left. And let's render out just a generic reflection pass. So what I'm going to do is hold down Shift, and over here in our subtool stack, tap one of the paintbrushes again with Shift held down. That's going to turn colorize off. So now if I go in here and select a white color, and we're going to swap out this material for, say, this MAH shiny. And in fact, we can go ahead and turn off floor if we want to. I can hit BPR. And then down here, actually, you know what? If this is going to be a pure reflective pass and we already have shadows built in, let's go ahead and turn shadows off. We'll hit BPR again. It should go pretty fast if we're not rendering any AO and shadows. There it goes. It goes pretty quick. And in fact, we don't even need this background on. It's not doing anything for us. We can just go ahead and turn that off. And again, we could even go in here to texture and say texture off. So down here in the BPR render pass, we're going to take this composite render, and instead of just saving it over the BPR composite, let's go ahead and call this Reflect 1. And let's try another reflection. Let's go back in here. We'll do a reflected map standard material. Hit BPR Render. Hit Composite again. Call this Reflect 2. Let's go select a basic material. Let's do some lighting passes. And by basic material, I don't mean Redshift materials. I mean this standard basic material in ZBrush. Now, we are going to need shading and light information, so we've got to go turn our light back on for our ZBrush BPR render. So here's our ZBrush light. It's set to 0.001. Let's set it to 1. And remember, we turned colorize off and we have a white material selected. Let's change that to a black material. We just want the light information. So let's go ahead and grab the material menu. And because we have the basic material selected, colorize turned off, our object has the basic material assigned. So we can go in here. Let's take the specular amount and we'll crank this up to like say 0.84. And then the specular curve, we're going to tighten that up just a little bit. And let's go back down to our light menu here. And as I move this light around, you're going to see that light direction update. If I want to do a rim light, what I can do is just tap on that orange dot and that'll send the light around back. So then I can just kind of position this over to the left. And then again, if you want to go back to the materials and, tighten up that spec or increase that spec, it's up to you. But with your light positioned in such a way, and let's go back down to our render properties. Let's go ahead and turn shadows back on, and then we'll hit BPR. So our main ZBrush light has shadows turned activated. So now it'll just give us that rim light. We'll go back down to our BPR composite. We'll call this light rim. Let's go back to our light menu. We'll throw it around to the other side. We'll go back up here to our material properties. We'll broaden that spec out a bit. We'll maybe turn that specular amount down. Go ahead and hit BPR render again. And we'll click composite. We'll go ahead and call this light fill. Let's go ahead and do a clown pass. You could go through and color fill all of these objects. I'm just going to go in here to polyframe, turn off line, have fill applied. And then if you want to, let's go ahead and make this so we can see this a little bit here. I'm going to switch out basic material to flat color. And you're going to see when I alt tap any of these, it might have polygroups enabled on here. So I'm just going to hit Control W for all of these to assign one polygroup per subtool. One easy way to do that is just hit Control W on the top subtool, hit the down arrow key, and then just keep hitting Control W and pressing down on your arrow key until all of your subtools are filled with one polygroup. And now, again, I have a flat material flat material applied. I'll go ahead and choose a white color. And now when I hit BPR, it'll render out a subtool color clown pass. So let's go back over here to our render composite and we'll call this clown. And now we'll go back into Photoshop. Go ahead and double click on the background here and we can grab all the latest ones that we created, hit open. Again, we'll do a window arrange, float all in windows. So here's our beauty. Here's our reflection map. So again, I'm just going to shift drag these in here. And we'll go ahead and grab the clown pass and we'll just throw this at the very top here. So I'm going to turn all of these off except for this first reflection map. Again, we'll just put a quick levels on there, hold down Alt and link it. And we'll go ahead and make this a little more punchy. And it's making everything punchy. If I just want this levels again to be applied to just this object here, again, I go in here to channels, control click mask. And with this levels mask that's already on here, I can just fill this with a black. And then I can control I to invert this. And now the levels are just assigned to just the object. Or what might have been easier, just control click this and then apply a masking to just the reflection. So we'll go ahead and say delete layer mask. But now you know how to do a color fill with your layer mask. So now we have the reflection over here. And this is where it just gets into a little bit of testing. You just go through here. Oops, we have levels. Let's go ahead and put this back to normal. Select the layer here. And then as you're going through here, you can see if any of this kind of jumps out at you as kind of working. So soft light looks like it's kind of working. We'll go ahead and stick with that. And then again, you can take this opacity up or down so you can just get a little bit of extra reflection in there. Now this isn't ray traced reflection from your environment. This is just a generic one, but just for, kind of punching something up, you can feel free to kind of just dial in a little bit of reflection in there. If you do want it assigned to just certain elements, like maybe just the burger and the hamburger meat, that's where you can go up here to your clown pass, hit W, click on the burger meat, we'll just hold down Shift. And in fact, we'll turn off contiguous. So when we go in here, we'll say we want the burger, the buns, the seeds, the cheese, and the lower bun. And then we'll turn this off. And then back down here on our reflection. Actually, I kind of don't mind it up here on the hat. Let's go back to our color here, make sure it's selected. And then we'll hold down Shift and we'll just add the reflection there. There we go. And then we'll hide it again. We'll go and select our, let's go ahead and label this so we know what we're doing. Let's call it BPR Reflection. And we want these areas to stay white and the rest of them to turn black. So we'll do Control-Shift-I and then go ahead and fill this with black. So now the reflection is just assigned to the pieces of that hamburger that you want. And again, you can go in here and play with this opacity a bit. Now we did throw in this other reflection. You can give that a shot. I think we're pretty good to go. So I'll go ahead and get that out of our scene. Let's go ahead and put our, well, the AO that we rendered out from ZBrush. You can see, I think the Redshift render is better, but you can go through and play with your AO settings and see what kind of results you get. So if you want to use the BPR AO, you can. Depth, we already got, right? And channels, in our channels here. Yeah, we already got our depth, so we didn't need to open that again. Our mask we already got. Okay, so here's our light. We have our light fill and we have our light rim. I just rendered out a couple of different types of versions of lights. Go nuts. You can render out as many light passes as you want. But we can go through here, hold down Shift, drag these right into our scene. We'll go ahead and call this light rim. Again, we just want it to affect our character. So underneath our channels here, we're going to hold Control-Tap Mask, and then we're going to assign a layer mask. So right now, it's just sitting over our object, and we just want the white areas to show up, not the black ones. So we just select this layer, go in here and say Screen. Now we got that pop of light, and just like we were doing, we can throw a levels on here, we can throw a hue set on here, hold down Alt and link these both. So now we have control over how punchy that light is, or how blown out it is, or how hot you can make that specular and very shiny, or going down here and changing the opacity to kind of lessen that effect. Also, you can go in here to hue set, turn on colorize if you want to warm this up a little bit. You can grab, kind of maybe a little bit of a warmer color, play around with the saturation. You can make it super warm, golden hour, or you can go down here and just dial in just a little bit of warmth. So that's kind of up to you. And then our light fill, exact same thing. Hold down Shift, throw this over here. We'll go ahead and control click this mask that's being used down there. It's just the character mask. Apply it here. We'll take the hue, set, and levels, drag it over the plus sign. We'll drag this above, link this to just the fill light. Again, set this to screen. And now instead of a warm, let's go ahead and tap that hue set. I'm going to drag this over here to the blues. Again, if you really want to see, we're kind of in the greens, which actually in this case probably makes sense. This is a little more sci-fi looking, but it is more of a greenish environment, maybe a little less saturated than that. And again, back down here on our levels, you can over crank this if you want to make this side blow out if you want to, or if you want to tighten it up a little bit, or if you just want to drop down the overall opacity of your fill light, you can do that. If you just want a little touch. So we can go ahead and get rid of our fill here. Now, if you did want to apply that lens blur, since we didn't do depth of field in our render, we can use our lens blur instead. So I'm going to do Control-A, Control-Shift-C, and then right at the very top here, hit Control-V. That's going to paste everything that we saw into a layer here, and then we can go in here to Filter, Blur, Lens Blur. For our source, we're going to choose our depth alpha. If we want to set the focal point maybe on the tip of his nose, we can click that on, and then as we click in here, it will set that focal point. And then I'm just going to crank up, that'll set our blur focal distance. And then our radius, we're just going to crank this up, and you're going to see in that depth mask, wherever it's white, it's going to be in focus if we're clicked on that area, and then everything else that's a gradient from white to black, it's going to be more blurry. So you can kind of use, I mean, we don't have to dial in a ton. And again, with this enabled, wherever you click on the object, that's what'll be in focus. And then if you want, you can hit OK, and that'll apply a lens blur to that. Another thing you can do, you can't just go in here and paint. So if you want to go in here to like, your dodge tool or your burn tool, you can go in here with dodge, and you can just make some areas pop with your dodge brush. You can go in here to the burn tool and go in here, and again, you can, I want to burn the shadows, the midtones, or the highlights, whatever you want to burn. You can go through here and you can darken some areas up, whatever makes sense. You can go in here and saturate or desaturate with the sponge tool. You can add layers in here, so we can do like maybe a color dodge overlay layer. And we'll just go into our brush here. We'll set these layers to color, that one to color dodge, this one to overlay. And again, you can hold down Alt and sample colors. We can drop our opacity and our flow up or down. And we can go through here and we can, you know, if you want to like punch up certain areas, you can go through and you can paint. If you just want to paint where your object is, again, you can go in here to channels, control click your mask, and then do control H. That'll hide those marching ants. And now when you're painting, it'll be constrained to just your object here. So this is an easy way to kind of go in here and put in some, you know, fake subsurface scattering. We just do like a red on the color dodge here. And then wherever there's a kind of a mid-tone, you can go in here and just kind of punch up that red if you want. And that'll kind of be like a little fake SSS look. Nothing you do. We'll do another Control A, Control Shift C to copy all layers, Control V to paste that. Go in here to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. We'll go ahead and just blur the heck out of this. That'll give us some local color. Go ahead and set that to Screen. We'll add a layer mask, Control I to invert it. D will make white your foreground color. So now we can go through here and we'll make this a very blurry brush, but this is basically a way where you can go through here and you can kind of, again, using that local color to go through here and put in some bloom on your edges. So if you see any areas where you really want to kind of go in and make it bloom, instead of just painting a color, you can use this to kind of go through here and very quickly add some bloom to your image. If you want to get rid of any, just tap X on your keyboard. That'll swap your white for your black color, and now you can just paint out, and that goes for any sort of mask. Now, if you want, you can also go down here to like your background, and we just put add a layer above your background. So we go in here and choose a color and fill it, and we're going to go ahead. We'll go ahead and group all these passes as paint over. We'll go ahead and get rid of that. But essentially what we did was we filled this background, so you can see we can have just our image without the background in there. You can just swap this out. In fact, you can also go in here to, say, the gradient tool. We'll click and drag. We'll go ahead and set this. If you do it linear, it'll just do a linear interpolation in here. We'll go ahead and do a circle, and we'll just go ahead and put this back here, and that'll kind of give us a little vignette. And you can go through here to your presets, and you can choose, you know, blues, purples, pinks, reds. Let's try oranges here. We'll just cycle through some of these maybe. Or it might be even better if we want to stick with our blues. If we want to maybe put the highlight over the character here, and then just have it kind of radial out. On top of that gradient, you can also do another hue set here. Alt tap between those to link it, and then you can go through here. You can just change the color. So instead of choosing a color, you can go through here and just cycle through a color and see what kind of fits. And again, you can crank up the saturation or change the lightness. And then if you just want to mock something up, you know, do your advertising campaign or whatever. But that's the basics of going into ZBrush, rendering out some images, rendering out some BPR passes, controlling those BPR passes, compositing those in Photoshop or your compositor of choice, adjusting the image however you'd like, and finishing out your final image.